Hello, and welcome to the next episode of The Prestige, a podcast about films, filmmaking and film theory.
Each week we'll focus on a particular movie chosen by one of us and let the theme develop out from a review or discussion about that and see where it takes us.
And as always, we'll end with some recommendations based on this week's choice, be they thematic, be they actors or whatever. But as always, we start by introducing ourselves.
Right, my turn this week. My name's Sam Knowles. I'm a lecturer, speaker, teacher, writer, close reader, iguana wrestler. One of those isn't true. I'm looking forward at the end of this week to meeting up with the co-editors of a special issue of the Journal of Postcolonial Writing on postcolonial graphic novels. That's what I'm taking a moment. And my companion is Rob Maythorne.
Hello!
Who has spent 10 years immersed in films. The first 3 of these doing a film studies degree, and then as part of the visual effects team of numerous films, big and small budgets. And now, having retired at the age of 30, he's just chilling out, pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah.
No, he's got loads of other stuff to do. As I tell you every week, he is doing lots of things to do with photography and editing and publishing.
So, this week, the film that I chose last week was the 2003 film The Station Agent. Notable for its lead actor being Peter Dinklage, now of Game of Thrones fame. But also great support from Patricia Clarkson, Bobby Cannavale, I'm not sure, Cannavale, and a early and young Michelle Williams. And also John Slattery from Mad Men in a very minor role. It tells the story of Finn Barr McBride, played by Peter Dinklage, who is a worker in a model railway shop, whose boss dies and leaves him a train depot in New Jersey. And it is a run-down, middle of the nowhere train depot, I think, with an attached kind of sort of train carriages. He walks from New York, from Hoboken, up to New Jersey, along the train lines, where he meets some locals, mainly in the form of Joe, who is like a local New York guy who's up there looking after his dad, and Olivia, who is a recently bereaved mother, probably going through a divorce. They form an unlikely and tempestuous friendship, and it's kind of about the 3 of them forming that friendship, and Finn Bimbar, the main character, coming into his own in this new world in which he initially wasn't part of and wasn't welcome. Sam, as the newbie to this film, your thoughts of it?
I loved it. I have a soft spot for films in which essentially nothing happens, but it's just beautifully made. And this was one of those. I'm not a fan of Game of Thrones, and therefore haven't really seen Peter Dinklage, but he is great in this. And also, constantly, was something that I'll refer to throughout this, because it served my way into this film. But there was an article on Peter Dinklage, an interview with him in the paper this weekend, coincidentally. So, yes, this was his, as I said, 2003, his breakout film. And this interview was particularly interesting because he spent a lot of his 20s up till, well, pretty much up to this point, so a few years before this film, having principles about the film projects he was involved in, and refusing to do work as a comedy leprechaun, for instance, which meant that he lived in a rat-infested flat for much of his 20s. And then came association with the director, whose name escapes me.
Of this film?
Yes.
Tom McCarthy.
Right. he did stage work with Tom McCarthy, and Tom McCarthy saw that this was an acting talent, and he took him on for this film, and then this was his breakout role. Yeah, I love this one. I love the way it was shot. And one of the things we'll be looking at this week is the idea of isolation, something that's very important to the film. So much so that in the blurb of the film, the film was described as Finbar's move to find solitude. But I'm not sure he does. It's never really sure. You're never really sure what he wants to find. There are times when he definitely wants to be left alone, and he says as much, or he makes it abundantly clear, as in the first few scenes in the depot. But I'm not sure that's what he was looking for, and I think it's much more a film about him looking for the acceptance in this community that you mentioned. Yeah, I love the way this film was shot. As I said, I love the way that isolation is introduced from the start, not just in the location, not just in him, but in everyone. Everyone is alone in this film in one way or another. And whether it's Joe caring for his sick father or Lydia grieving over her son, everyone is on their own in some way or another.
Well, I think you've done the whole podcast, Sam. I can just retire now.
Okay, good.
I would echo Sam's thoughts on the film. I picked it this week, and it's a film that I've probably seen at this point five or six times.
Oh, right.
If anyone knows the amount of films I watch and the turnover of films I have, if any film gets sort of at least a second viewing, it's rare. Let alone this film. It's an easygoing film, and it's the sort of thing that in the past I can pop on while I'm doing other things. But I think that's to consider it that kind of film alone is to do it a disservice. I think it's a wonderful film. I think the plotting and the arcing of it as a intense viewing experience is far more rewarding than just background viewing it, certainly. I also do think that it's a beautifully shot film with great scenes in it, so that if you are dipping in and out, it still works. And for me, I think a lot of that, as we mentioned, rides on our three main characters, Joe, Olivia and Finn. Now, obviously, Peter Dinklage has gone on to some great success and great renown, but I do think in this film he's matched by the other two. People who, certainly the character, especially in the case of Joe, who I really thought early on could be very stereotypical, very kind of... I could see him being annoying real fast when he first appears. But I think that Bobby, the actor, really infuses like a heart to him, and you see a little bit of almost the underneath of what's really going on there. And I think there's some and Patricia Clarkson's great as Olivia. And I think almost everybody in this film, start to end, is just great. I think that, as Sam pointed out, I think it's shot beautifully. I think that the themes that they're shooting for with this film are echoed and mimicked in the way it's shot. You know, you've got lots of level shots of side on of them walking in lines, and there's lots of almost posed up angles that are designed to work as visual images, rather than the camera being the invisible eye that just circles the action. We see the action. You very much get the feeling that some of the shots in this film are purposefully chosen and presented to us as visual imagery, knowing visual imagery. I mean, if you've seen the film, there, as I say, the key examples are there are several shots where they all walking the right of way they're all walking a line along railway tracks, and they're very clearly contrived images. And
yes, not only contrived, but it calls to mind something like the iconic bits of Stand By Me. That idea of walking in a line in that sort of space is something that has been done before, and like you said, the director knows what he's doing, knows that this is contrived. And I was thinking about the shots of Peter Dinklage on It was on the roof of the train carriage, and it's like you say, it's almost posed. There's a shot towards the end where he's just standing there in the middle of nowhere.
I think that we'll touch on this a bit later when we get into sort of the themes of this week, but I do think that it's a wonderful mix. I think that of these things, I think films like this that often get called in kind of like the mumblecore genre, where they're kind of about nothing, to people talking and relaxing. I think that some of those can take that too far, and you end up having uninteresting films. Ultimately, film is a visual medium, and we touched on this briefly with the Mad Max episode. But at a certain point, when it comes to a lot of films, I try and ask the question: why is this a film? Why is this a film rather than a radio play, rather than a book, rather than a still photograph? What is making a film giving it? And I think that's where I really like this film, is because whilst it is that easygoing, nothing really happens film, visually it's still interesting. A lot of these mumblecore films can be visually a bit nothingness because it's about that experience, but I think this keeps it visually interesting. And I think the three main characters are visually interesting, all the background actors are visually interesting. You get, the diversity in this film is great. I mean, yes, you are looking at him living in a very white sort of suburban area of town, but you have black characters, old characters, young characters. You have obviously dwarfism characters. You have divorced characters, young. There's a great sort of diversity in the cast, and it keeps the film visually interesting. And all the background characters are interesting. I mean, even John Slattery from Mad Men, who turns up in basically one scene as Olivia's ex-husband, he's a striking and a visually interesting person to look at. And I think that they managed to pull that almost all the entire film, is that nobody in this is probably, movie star good looking. Everyone is interesting to look at. Even the barmaid in the one pub in town has you feel a backstory to her.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily comparable visually, but it's something that we've had with a few episodes recently, certainly with Inside Out and with Ant-Man as well, is this idea of not much happening, but it's an important story. You have Ant-Man, the central story is the drive to save his daughter, or Inside Out, the central story is a young girl trying to come to terms with a house move, essentially. Yes. And here you have it's not really very much of a central story, but
no,
it's important. These people's lives are important.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, we will touch onto some spoiler territory moving forwards here, but I do think that's like the ending of the film, because they kind of through the film they go through this roller coaster of being friends, of not being friends, of being friends, of not being friends.
By the way, if you haven't seen the film, pause this podcast now and go and see it.
Yes,
because it's really good, and also it is a perfect length, so it's not going to take too much time out of your day.
I mean, in general, I'm happy to issue the edict that we do tend to tell you in the podcast what we're watching next week. So,
yes. Yeah, okay.
We will touch on spoilers, and I do think that the resolution of the film, even if it came back to the apartment, ends in a certain way that isn't the traditional climax of a film. But for the nature of the film is perfectly encapsulates that ending, where all through the film you've dealt with these characters and their own neurosis and their own isolations and their own problems, and you always end up with this scene. You end with this scene that just feels, for quite a naturalistic film, so natural that these three friends are together, and it's just easy going, and it hasn't got any of the problems that they've had during the film at this point.
So something else I noticed was how loving the conversations are between these characters, and how genuine this friendship is. You have, for example, Joe's genuine interest in Finn's trains, and he says, "What do you people do?" And you think, "Uh-oh, we're going to veer off into Latino New York stereotype here, and we're going to have an awkward conversation about dwarfism." But no, he's genuinely interested in what train people do. Yeah, you have clubs.
And I think you've got to, one thing that I do look at film is that whilst Peter particularly talk about not doing films about dwarfism, this film does touch on him being a dwarf in many ways. It's strange that his arc isn't about him being a dwarf.
No.
His arc's about him being alone, and we'll go into more. But there are a few characters, mainly the kids in New York and the two rednecks in Newfoundland, who do make a thing of it. And
Yes.
there's I think quite a powerful scene in which Finn gets very drunk and kind of confronts the local prejudice in a bar about the stuff. But the main characters and a lot of the characters there's never a thing about it, you know. But it doesn't feel contrived in that. Well, they're blind to it. It just feels that they see that person rather than anything else.
I think the film set up to make you think of him that way as well. It was something I was struck by the very, very start when he goes to New Jersey. Well, not the very start, in the first 5 minutes he goes to New Jersey, and all the buildings are big and drab, and no pun intended, but he is dwarfed by the structures around him, and yet you think, well, anyone would be because they're buildings. So
Yes.
you don't think of him like that at all. It's just a man overwhelmed by his environment.
Yeah, and I think whilst obviously you have to take all this up in a both the way Sam and I are white, able-bodied people, so we can't speak for experience. But I do think that the film is great in the opening scene. The opening shot of Finbar is him dressed all in like black trousers, white shirt, smoking on a rooftop, which is contrary to, I suppose, very much the images that dwarfism presents in media of them being bright, colourful, funny. You know, we rarely see them smoking. You rarely see them kind of having a real life. And I do think the opening statement and Peter Dinklage's whole costume for the entire film is a stark refusal to play into that narrative.
Yes.
But as we said at the start, and obviously in the title of this, the theme that really struck me when watching this film again and in the past is that of isolation. The three main characters, I think, whilst in very different ways, are very isolated, and I think that the film handles all their sort of their start places and their end places very well. Finn, obviously, due to the nature of his disability and his lifestyle choices, like really hard from dwarfism, he's a train spotter, which isn't renowned for being very socially accepted. He's clearly isolated in New York, and when he first moves to New Jersey. Bobby, or Joe, obviously out of his home. He's obviously from Manhattan. He's currently up in New Jersey. But there was a scene in which you were talking to the rednecks. You felt that he's clearly from this town, and he's clearly no longer part of it. That the local good old boys that he grew up with are living a certain life. He isn't living that life. So even though he's at home where he grew up, you really feel like he's isolated from everything there. You know, he's there alone. He hasn't got many friends. He hasn't got a partner, and he hasn't even got his childhood friends who he can talk to.
And it would have been so easy in that scene for the thing that isolated him to be his treatment of Finn. So you get the rednecks abusing Finn and him sticking up for Finn. But that's not what isolates him, because he hasn't been to play softball with them for weeks.
Yes.
So he's already distanced from them.
And you do get very much. I mean, even visually looking at the characters, you know, he's in t-shirts and shorts and very New York, but they're very redneck. They are at times very kind of stereotypically redneck. And I think that they do set him up as being apart from that, and regardless of their mockery of Finn, the whole conversation is so awkward. And like from the outside, you clearly see that Joe just doesn't want to talk to them. He knows that it's going to end badly. And I think that awareness of their problems is going to set you like that. I mean, with anything, once you can see the problems as part of the culture you're in, you're already outside it a little bit. And then you've got Olivia, who's the character who's clearly, she's lost her son. She's going through a divorce. She's living in a big house by herself. She seems to be, at least at the start of the film, the most together of them. She chats to the librarian. she seems the most together at the end, but over the course of the film clearly becomes the least together. I think that they set all three of those up to be isolated in their own ways and handle them very well.
There's something. There's a going back to this idea of loving relationships between them. There's a chemistry between these three characters that's another thing that makes this film so good, is that the lead actors are very good, and also they're very good with each other.
Yes,
they play off each other really well. And I'd never seen either of the others before, actually.
Well, weirdly, Joe is in Ant-Man.
Really?
He is the stepdad.
Oh, so he is. Okay, well, I have seen him before.
I'm not lying. I had to Google it when I started watching it. I feel I've seen him recently. I googled it, and he's in that. Patricia Clarkson. It wasn't another face I know, but I'm trying to place where else I've seen her. I'm trying to think what else she's been looking at recently. She was in The Maze Runner, but I don't remember that. No,
I missed that.
It's all right. But yeah, I think that, I say, in addition to what's happening about this sort of thing, I think it was shot very interestingly in relation to the isolation. I think you got a couple of things that really kind of struck me with all three characters. You got Finn, who in Robbins clearly the entire film wears black and white. He never wears any colour apart from pure black and white, and it's being shot in this almost sumptuous landscape of trees and hills and rivers, and everywhere the camera points there's greenery. And then you've got him in a monochrome palette stood out from that whole world. And I felt the bit of that last shot where they're all kind of bathed in like the orange glow of the lights, he suddenly felt like he was part of the landscape he hadn't until that point. And then I look at Joe and his tiny little van. Like he feels the van in which he works.
The hot dog van. Yes,
hot dog van. Like he feels a scale of magnitude too big for that van. Like physically, he always felt out of place where he was working. He always felt like he was just a foot too tall to work there.
Yes.
And it is almost always shot in a large sort of wide angle lens with big greenery and this little white van. And then almost the opposite of that is that like Olivia, who's in this giant big house and seems to get over the film progressively smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. As the weight of this house and this life kind of seems to envelop her.
Owing to various boring technical difficulties, I had to watch this in remarkably bad resolution, so I didn't actually see the detail of any of the painting she was doing. What was was there something about them that Joe reacted to in the first instance?
From what I can gather, and most of the, in fairness, you weren't missing a lot. A lot of them were very abstract, sort of blocky art, so it wasn't entirely extreme.
Okay.
They mostly seem to be portraits of male faces. So I couldn't tell whether Joe was reacting. Joe and Phil were reacting to them. Oh, that's her son.
Yeah.
Or because having seen there is a photograph they show of the son. And the portraits don't look like that person, but they were more abstract. And my assumption from the point of view of Finn was that he took it to be these are her, or it's her son or her husband, or her reactions to that. It did feel that his reaction was, that's a private thing, I'm not touching that. Joe, on the other hand, was much more kind of poke that and see what happens.
And that was something about Joe that you got throughout the film. Particularly, I mean, when Cleo points out the video camera, and Joe's first instinct is to pick it up and have a play with himself. It himself. And yeah, Pete Dinklage's Finn is far more whatever. And Joe is very hands-on and very. I want to touch this. I want to see what it does.
I think that there's something notable in the fact that it struck me last night and I actually clocked the time that you never see Finn smile until they're train chasing.
Yes.
That's the first time that you see him smile. And I think part of that is because you see these two people, between Olivia, who gets him a camera, and Joe, who drives him chasing. These people who are doing things for him when he almost when he's asked not to, but when he wants to do it, but he'll never say, I want to do it. And these two people are just like, no, you like that, we're doing this. And I do think that's a testament to Peter Dinklage, that he kind of carried it. It didn't feel forced, it just felt notable, and this was a thing that finally they cracked that shell.
Yeah.
And there is a nice kind of symmetry or cyclical nature to it. It takes the two of them to bring him out of the shell. You get the feeling that at the start of the film he saves Joe a bit.
Right, yes.
And then Joe saves him, and then they both save Olivia. There's a weird kind of sort of triptych to that story there.
There's something that I wanted to bring up, is there's a literary reference in it, which I think is pertinent to this point, that you kind of think that the voyages that he goes on when he's walking the right of way?
Yes.
And Joe goes with him. You think, oh, he's in charge of that, and Joe's just tagging along. But Joe says, where are we going, Sancho Panza? And for all you book nerds, Sancho Panza, Don Quixote's sidekick in Don Quixote, Cervantes. So you've had this narrative in which Finn takes the lead on their walks, but you've got a character saying, well, as quite apart from the fact it's something that the rednecks of the town would never say. They'd never make a reference to 17th century Spanish literature, but also you've got Joe at this point saying, well, you're the psychic now, and somehow I'm in charge. So there's a nice balance to it all the way through.
You can see that in Joe. Joe's often very much on pushing for it, and there's lovely shots when they meet up at a park bench, and sort of Joe starts off really kind of not caring about the trains, but kind of intimidated by it all, and then it just cuts to him leaping excitedly at a train that goes past while Finn just sits there.
Yes.
And you mentioned this earlier, but I do think one of the things I like most about this film is that the genuine enthusiasm that everyone has for everyone else's stuff. That at no point do the three of these go, trains, that's a bit nerdy, isn't it? Joe is genuinely interested in the trains.
And when Joe makes food for them and leaves, Olivia says to Finn, "Oh, this is really nice," and she's not being polite because Joe's not there anymore.
Yes,
there's a genuine appreciation for something that someone else has got, and something that someone else has done for you.
I think that there's. I think that's, as we said, it really does nail that friendship, but it also balances that. It nails the isolations. So as always, we end our podcast with some recommendations based on a theme or our inspirations for this week. Now, obviously, Ignition is a bit of a singular film, but Sam, do you have anything to throw in the mix?
Yes. Have you got any Peter Dinklage films?
I haven't.
Right. Well, I will just mention that. Well, I'll briefly mention this because I haven't seen it myself, so it doesn't really count as a recommendation. But he made an early film called Living in Oblivion, which was in 1995. It was in the middle of this period of poverty that I mentioned in his 20s. And it was an angry young man piece, and he there's one point where he's talking to Steve Buscemi, and he rails against how people treat him as a dwarf. And there's a memorable line where someone mentions a dwarf in their dream, and Peter Dinklage takes umbrage at that and says, "Well, why did if you just put a dwarf in your dream to make sure it was a dream? Like, no one dreams about dwarves. Even I don't dream about dwarves." So there's something that's been central to him throughout his career. Is that
I've just googled that film and I have seen it.
Oh, well, tell us more.
Oh, I saw it many years ago, and I remember there's one great scene in which Steve Buscemi is a film director, and he's trying to get an amazing performance out of an actress, and she just can't do it. And so they cut and take 5 minutes, and then she, when cameras aren't off, gives this heartfelt, emotional performance, but just can't do it in front of a camera. It's good. I mean, I probably saw it, I don't know, 15 years ago. But yeah, no, I look back now, that was a good film.
Okay, right. Well, I'll count that as a recommendation. Via Rob. My genuine recommendation for myself has nothing really to do with. Certainly has nothing to do with the Peter Dinklage. It's just has something to do with the way, the beautiful way this film is shot. And it reminded me of a film from a couple of years ago called The Way, Way Back, which is also not really about anything, but it's beautifully shot, and it's set in a particular green, leafy part of America, in a way that this is. It focuses on, well, the narrative has nothing in common with Station Agent, but it focuses on a teenage boy and a theme park. But I would say that this reminded me very much of the way that was filmed, the way that was shot, and I enjoyed that film. I enjoyed that film as a visual experience in the way that you were talking about this film right at the start. The way this film looks good and it's aesthetically pleasing.
Well, funnily enough, my first recommendation was going to be The Way, Way Back, which is why I laughed at the start of your listen there.
Right.
On the basis that I felt dealt with the same ideas of loneliness and the main character feeling lonely or isolated from the start, especially from his family and all that stuff. But no, I saw that probably this summer and really liked it, and that was indeed my first recommendation. So I shall pull a second one out of the air now. But the other recommendation I was going to give is a film from 1999 called Ghost Dog: Way of the Samurai.
Right.
Ghost Dog: Way of the Samurai stars Forrest Whitaker as a mafia hitman who follows the samurai Bushido code. He is, due to various reasons, targeted by the mob who he's worked for many years for death, basically. And it's about him defending himself against incoming mob men. But it does deal with the same... He lives by himself on the rooftop with his pigeons. But it does deal with that same idea of an isolated man forced to interact with the world and what he gets from interactions. It's a very different sort of film. It's a samurai violent film, but it's set in New York. But it still has things like Forrest Whitaker in the lead, still has that powerhouse of acting and the unusual casting for a lead against type, shall we say. So,
okay.
And I think it is in the same vein as The Station Agent, as beautifully shot, aside from its content. So, given that Sam's taken The Way Back from me, the other recommendation I'm going to recommend is a film from 2 years ago called The Kings of Summer.
Right.
The Kings of Summer is about 3 teenage friends who decide to spend their entire summer in the woods building a house and living off the land. And it's about their adventures as kind of living in the woods. They kind of them dealing with it in their trials and tribulations, and quite an ending, shall we say, to it. But it has that same kind of feeling of a small person is a huge world, and it is as visually interesting and visually smart as The Station Agent or The Way Back.
Okay. Well, next week it is my choice.
It is.
And I'm moving away from beautifully shot art house films, or independent films, to look at a big smash crash fantasy film from a few years ago. Is Joseph Gordon-Levitt and what's the other one? Bruce Willis?
Bruce Willis.
Yes, in Looper.
Uh-huh.
So we'll have a look at Looper next week.
Lovely, guys. If you want to check us out online, you can find the both of us and a podcast on Twitter at Prestige Podcast.
You can find me at life_academic.
And you can find just me under Rob Kaiju on Twitter. If you look up podcasts, guys, please give us a recommendation or a review on iTunes. Give us a like and a follow on SoundCloud. Or wherever you listen to us, please kind of give us a thumbs up or whatever it takes. It really helps us get in front of more people and to help grow our fan base for the show. So cheers.
And look forward to talking about Looper next week.
See you then.
Bye.
The Prestige is a Kaiju Industries production. Check out their other work at facebook.com/Kaiju Industries. Rawr! Arg.